Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Karen Barrick. Looking forward to our conversation today, Karen.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, be
Yeah,
good.
brilliant. I was saying before we hit record, so many of the recent interviews have been across the pond in the States, in different parts of the States. So it's great to be speaking to somebody closer to home because Karen runs One Adoption South Yorkshire, which is just about 30 miles, 30 miles, 35 miles away south of me. We're up in North Yorkshire, Karen's in
Okay. Yeah.
South Yorkshire, yeah. So, as well as being an adoption professional, Karen is a mum too. Your son is 18, if I remember.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, he
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
And he's away at university doing mechanical
He
engineering. Is
is.
that
So
right?
yeah, mechanical engineering degree down in London. So yeah,
Right.
bit of a distance between us at the moment, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's about for those people looking what that distance is. It's about 100, probably 170 miles or something like that.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to, to the smoke to London.
Yes,
Yeah.
somewhat, yeah.
Yeah. So what comes to mind, Karen, when you hear this word thriving? What does thriving mean to you?
I suppose it means more than just being and existing, doesn't it? It means getting the most out of life, doing as well as you can, um, becoming a productive adult, I suppose, those kinds of things, really. So, yeah, I suppose enjoying life to its full, not just existing. So, something more than that.
Yeah. And if I add the word adoptees, right? So I go to the phrase thriving adoptees for the name of the podcast. What does that lens change for you in terms of or not, right? In terms of a way that you see thriving adoptees.
Well, I suppose I've always thought that, children in care, adopted, subject to all kinds of, proceedings should have exactly the same opportunities as
Yeah.
everybody else, if I'm honest with you. So I think in some sense it shouldn't
No.
change just because somebody's adopted. We should have the best of expectations for our children, shouldn't we? And I think that would be where I'm at with that. I suppose that said, we accept that many adopted people have had challenges prior to being adopted, and have had many losses quite often at the point that that happens for them, and have a history that will impact on their growing up and how they see life and how they process average things in life. So that impacts. But I still think our ambition should be that our adopted people should have all the same opportunities
Yeah.
and experiences as anybody else, as far as that's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess expectations change from child to child. I'm just thinking about uh, somebody that's more a friend of mine, right? So he's a mechanic. He's great with his hands. I wasn't great with my hands, but I was different academically. So for him to go down the same route as me wouldn't have been in keeping with his skills.
Sure.
So it's got nothing to do with the fact that he was raised by the people that um, the parents that gave birth, the mum that gave birth to him and his dad. It's different different strokes for different folks. To sound a bit
Yeah.
American when two British people are talking, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think that's true of all children, isn't
Yes,
it?
of course.
In that, you can give birth to a child and actually they're not interested in anything you're interested in. They're their own person, aren't they? And I suppose with my son as well, he's not biologically my son, and we have some shared interests. We love the outdoors and going camping and stuff like that. And he's quite musical and so am I. But then, the areas in which he's chosen for his career and that he does well in, physics, maths, I managed to fail my GCSE physics twice, quite frankly.
Yeah.
We're not good at the same thing. So, and I think he's taking time to find the thing that is right for him. So, he has some dyslexia as well. So forget English and languages. That was never going to be his thing. People have to find what they're good at. And I think as he's grown and found that in life, so his confidence has grown.
Yeah.
And he's been able to put his energies into things that he knows that he's good at. He's always been
Yeah.
very creative. He's always been very good at fixing things. Our house is full of stuff that he's fixed, which is great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, really great practical skills to have. So yeah, absolutely. It's very
Yeah.
individual, isn't it, about each person?
Yeah. So what you're talking about, I think, then is playing to our strengths.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important for all of us, isn't it, actually? That we find the thing that makes somebody happy, or they're good at, or they just enjoy, and then we give them the opportunities to engage in those as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that helps with all sorts of things, doesn't it? Your emotional well-being, your view of yourself, your self-esteem. Yeah.
Yeah. So we sometimes dive into this link in the podcast. We want the adoptees, the adopted kids and teens, adopted adults. We want them to thrive. So for them to be thriving, we need to be, we as adoptive parents. I'm just lumping myself in for the sake of the conversation. We need to be thriving, and the the professionals that support those adopted parents, they need to be thriving too. So how do you see that link
Mm,
from a both a personal and a professional,
mm.
or whichever way you want, whichever route that you want to go down, Karen?
Yeah. So I guess in terms of professionally, that support system professionally around adopted young people and families needs to be well informed, doesn't it? So I think, it's really important that our staff understand trauma, they understand the impact of early childhood experiences and even pre-birth experiences on our children and young people. We have a psychologist as part of our service at One Adoption South Yorkshire, and all our staff are trained in a variety of therapeutic interventions because we believe that that's important. And then we provide the support system for that staff group as well. So not only do we train them in those things, but we provide them opportunities to reflect and think about how they approach families and how they use those skills with those families. So I guess we're helping our staff group to be well supported so that they're thriving professionally, they're growing professionally, they're understanding professionally what's going on for families, and they're therefore able to support and help
Yeah.
where they need to, aren't they? I suppose for adoptive parents, again, that information is really important, isn't it? I know historically we've probably not been great at giving adopters all the skills and the information that they've needed. I think we're better at that now. And I think some adopters potentially are better at understanding some of that need to parent adopted children in a slightly different way or with some additional skills than others. But I think as adopted parents, thriving is as a parent and meeting our children's needs is about having those skills, that knowledge, somewhere to go for support, somebody to talk to. I think that's really, really important. I mean, I was a single adopted parent. That's really important, isn't it? When you've not got somebody else to bounce off all the
Yeah.
time. Maintaining your own kind of hobbies, I suppose, and interests, so that you've got inputs as well as outputs.
Yeah.
And I suppose do you know? I think the biggest, most important thing I would say that has helped us to thrive as a little family has probably been just that bond that we had right from the off, and it's one of those things. Sometimes, isn't it? It's a combination of chemistry, personalities, interests, all kinds of things, isn't it, really? But
Yeah,
I just think building that relationship with between parent and child really early on is so crucial. And when a little person comes into your life, you might be 3 or 4, it's not having a tiny baby that you're meeting their basic needs and you learn as you go along what they're like. You've got a little person that comes
yeah,
into your life suddenly, haven't you? And there are lots of things that we can do to build relationships and trust and
yeah.
attachment that I think really help little families to thrive in that sense.
What if you, if thinking back to the early years with
Mm,
your son? Clearly, he's 18 now. So, what were the key kind of lessons that you learn in terms of that, in terms of that bond? Because it can seem, I guess it can seem quite logical, and also to me, there's a certain magic to it that you can't put into words as well.
yeah.
Like I think of why do I love my wife?
Mm,
I can't really put my
mm,
finger on it. I remember asking myself that question early into our relationship, and the only thing I could think of logically
mm,
was the fact that she's reliable. She does what she says she's going to do. I can trust her.
mm,
Right. And I trusted her because I worked with her. So we worked together before we got together.
mm,
So I had that trust,
mm,
which is a key part of a bond, right? But
mm,
that's me
mm.
and my missus. What about you and your son? What did you?
So I suppose that journey for an adopter, you start to get to know about the little one that might become your child through bits of paper, don't you? You're reading reports and that kind of thing. For me, I read those bits of paper and thought, well, there's nothing, I'd like to know more about this little boy. It wasn't an instant sort of, he's the one for me. Um, and then there was a process really of the social worker coming round and you get to know a little bit more and then you go and visit the foster carer and you go and get to know a little bit more, don't you? But there were key moments for me, I suppose. One was, his little jacket on the seat of the car at the foster carer's home that made him real. I went to his nursery at that time, so he was nearly 4, but and the people at the nursery clearly loved him to bits, and wanted to come and find out who I was. I thought I felt quite vetted by them. But
Yeah,
in a strange sense, what it said to me was they loved him and they cared for him, and there was something about that little boy that that was really endearing to them as professionals. And I think gradually through that process, I made an emotional connection with him. Um, and then you have to go to panel and all these other things happen and then you have to wait and then you finally meet the little person, and I think for me he was very much what I expected, so that was good. That meant the professionals had probably done their job well. And yeah, we just made, I suppose, an immediate connection really in that sense. I think there was then a process, once he came sort of to live with me, of us getting to know each other. He was a little person of 4, and he didn't know me and I didn't know him very well. After a couple of weeks, you're still very much strangers, aren't you, in some senses? And I remember thinking tangibly, I really like this little boy, and I used to tell him I loved him, but I used to think, I'm not sure I feel that quite yet. And that was a process really. It wasn't until one night he was really ill one night, throwing up all over the bathroom floor where there was stuff everywhere. It was awful. And he just sat on my knee and he just said, "I love you, mummy." And I just said, "I love you, darling, too." And that was it really, And I suddenly thought, no, this is it, isn't it? But it was a process. And I suppose that moment was for him. He was really vulnerable and not very well. He needed me, didn't he? And I was kind of feeling all protective, I suppose, and brought the whole thing together. And so that was interesting for me as a professional, because you you don't always get all the nuances of that personal, adopt a child thing, do you? I suppose in my head, I thought, oh, somebody waves a bit of magic dust and you immediately fall in love with this child you've heard about. Where actually, the reality is, as with many relationships, it's a process, isn't it? Over a period of time. And for some of us, a relatively short time, and others a little bit
yeah.
longer. And then that relationship begins to grow and you develop shared interests and you recognize that, some of their character background is very individually theirs. I think one of the things that struck me as well, we were doing a jigsaw one day, and I do a jigsaw in a certain way. I like to put in the corners and then the edges, and and he was sat there picking out the little characters in the jigsaw and building the little characters. And I was really tempted to say, well, actually, let's do it like this. And I just thought, actually, his way is perfectly valid, isn't it? It doesn't need to do a jigsaw the way I do a jigsaw. He needs to do it his way. And I suppose you learn, don't you, that actually not correcting him at that point allows him to be him, doesn't it? Not
Yeah,
not the person I need him to be, but he can be whoever he needs to be, can't he? And come at things from a different perspective if he needs to do that.
yeah. So thinking back to that night with him on your knee and him sharing,
Mm.
telling you that uh, he he loved you. Maybe that was something about you being there for him when he was struggling, and maybe
Yeah,
his guard down. But how do you? That's just my opinion from the outside, right? What did it feel like for you? What if you were to to think back for that moment, knowing him better now? What do you think was going on for him in that in that
I,
moment?
Yeah, I think when you're feeling pretty rough, when you're feeling really poorly, you need somebody to be there for you, don't you? And I think in that moment and probably in the weeks leading up to that moment, we'd begun to form that trusting relationship. And yeah, I think in that moment, and they often say, don't they, if you take a child swimming or something like that, that helps to build that bridge because the child has to trust you in that moment. And it helps to build, and you as a parent have a natural sort of protective instinct, I guess, as well. And the little moment, it creates
Yeah,
improved attachment and bonding. There was another occasion very soon after he'd come to well, I think the same night that he had actually moved in, actually, he was really, really upset and crying for his foster carer, which, was perfectly natural. He'd lived there for 18 months. That was his safe place. And it's as an adopted parent, you don't always quite know how you're going to respond or what you're going to do in situations. Um, but I had some training ringing in my ears, really,
yeah,
about me being the adult in that situation and needing to take control of it. So I just picked him up, sat him on my knee, and I just said, "It's really okay to be sad. It's okay to be sad. I understand why you're sad. You've left somewhere that you love and people that you love, and we'll stay in touch with them." But, doing that reassuring thing was, I think, really important in that moment. Can't say I processed it lots because it
yeah,
happens and you have to deal with it. But I think giving him permission to be sad when actually I just brought my son home was really important as well. And all these things add to a picture, don't they? Whereby your child learns that actually they can feel all kinds of things
yeah,
about their past and it's okay. You can talk about it. Your parent's not going to have a meltdown or somehow feel that that's not a valid thing to feel.
yeah,
So I think there's a number of things that sort of led up to that moment, if I'm honest. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think the validation and permission to feel
Mm,
less than top 100%, feeling bad and feeling sad. Uh, I think that's so key
mm,
because I clearly your son's a generation or two generations behind me in terms of my age. He's 40 years younger than me, and what I hear a lot about
mm,
adults that I interview that in my generation is that their parents, adoptive parents, invalidated their
mm,
feelings and uh, tried to correct them. Tried to change their feelings, and that never goes well with anybody. When trying to change something, or buck your ideas up. All right, yes, like it doesn't matter whether it's got anything to do with your biological child, it's your adopted child, whether it's your brother, your sister, your mum, or your dad.
mm,
Telling somebody to buck their ideas up and get over it, it never works. No, it never in
No,
the, never. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll do that then. Yeah, thank you for the suggestion on how to
no,
change my emotions. I'll go away and I'll do that, and I'm okay now.
no,
It just doesn't work.
no, no, no. No. And I think, feelings, that expressed feeling in that moment was absolutely the right thing to
Yeah,
express, wasn't it? If we move away from somebody that we care about, we're sad, aren't we? It's a natural, normal feeling. And I think sometimes doctors get stuck, there's your response is, I've just brought my brand new child home and how exciting is this? But actually in that moment, your child is missing somebody as well as excited. Don't get me wrong, he went to bed singing that night, but there was that mixture of
yeah,
emotion going on for him, which needed to be acknowledged and
yeah,
and was right actually. And afterwards, when I thought about it, I thought, I'm glad he did. I'm glad that's how he felt, because it was a normal, natural thing
yeah,
to feel, wasn't it? It
yeah.
was the right thing to feel, and it wasn't right for me to suppress it.
No, no.
And we
Uh,
didn't have that perfect nice tea at the table that night. I just hastened
no.
to add that I never told the social worker about. We ended up with a bowl of ice cream sat on the sofa watching a nice film, because that was the thing we needed to do that
In the
night.
moment, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's fascinating because he got over that feeling.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
well, not straight away, but there was further sadnesses as those days went on, but those were appropriate as well. I
yeah,
suppose they became fewer over time, and we
yeah,
continued to talk about them, and we had things that had come from their house, so there were lots of reminders as well that
yeah,
were important. But yeah, he was able to deal with it, I suppose,
yeah,
wasn't he? Because he was allowed to feel it.
yeah. I wasn't being clear. I meant he got over it that night. And
Yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
often think about kids being able to get over their stuff faster than adults can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, 1 minute they're in one place, aren't they? And then the next minute, you're playing with cars, aren't they? And you
yeah,
think, oh, what, something major happened there, but it's got for them,
yeah,
it's gone, isn't it? And they moved
yeah,
on. But yeah, yeah. And you're left with that as adults to process, aren't you, quite often?
yeah.
But
One of the things that fascinates me about kids and emotions and parenting, because my wife haven't got any kids, is vulnerability and how vulnerable we are as adults, as parents, with kids about our feeling less than 100%. And so I'd love to. And the reason I do that is the reason I ask that question is because I've done some work in schools, and I shared just very briefly. I shared some tough stuff that I'd been through and some feelings off the back of that when I was a kid, and that really I got the sense that these were 10, 11-year-old kids. I got the sense that adults don't usually do that.
mm,
Um, or it wasn't normal, presumably not in a
mm,
school setting. But what do what's your approach on vulnerability with
mm,
uh, with your son?
mm. So I think I would be measured about it, in that I suppose we have adult things going on in life that children don't need to be burdened about, some
Yeah,
depending on their age, do we? Um, but equally, there were days when I would come home. I'd had a busy, probably a pretty difficult day at work, and I would have said, oh, actually, I'm quite. To be fair, he's a lovely little lad anyway, so he quite often says, "How's your day been, Mum?"
yeah,
And most of the time I'd say it's fine. I'm yeah busy, but make it. But occasionally I would say, actually, it's been a really difficult day. I've had some really difficult, nasty meetings today. Because I actually think it's important for children to be able to, I suppose, process that, understand that not everybody they've come across in life is, is absolutely fine, and that that there's a reciprocal thing going on there, isn't there? Which is about, you know, me being interested in him, but him being interested in me as a person as well. That's a relationship, isn't it? It's not all one-way traffic. I suppose getting that balance between protecting him from things that would generate a lot of anxiety, to sharing things that maybe just let him know that we're not always we don't always do things right. And don't get me wrong, I was far from a perfect parent, but and there were times when I was cross with him or irritated. But again, I would at times say, look, I'm sorry, I spoke to you like that. That was because, I'm outsourced today, or, this happened for me today, but that wasn't right for me to say that to you in that way. And I think that's important as well, to be able to say, we're sorry, that we've done something that, we're none of us perfect, are we? And that even as parents, we're not perfect either. And I think it helps them to be able to say sorry back, doesn't it? As
Yeah,
well.
yeah. How does the professional hat and the mum stuff, how do they inform one another, Karen?
Hmm. I mean, I'd been in social work, children's social work, and adoption for many years prior to adopting my son. I think what was interesting, I sort of went into becoming an adoptive parent thinking I'm not quite sure I'm going to learn from this process really, only to find that actually applying it to yourself is very different to your professional view. And I did learn a lot actually, and a lot about me, I suppose, and me in that situation. Some of the I'm still in touch with some of the people who delivered some of the training, in those early days, and walked with me on that early journey. And that was an adopted parent who'd adopted 3 children herself, and some of her insights were absolutely invaluable, actually, quite frankly, and have come to mind over the years many, many times. So I think
Could you
having
share
that.
those, Karen? Could you share some of those insights or some of your own
Um,
insights?
yeah, so I'm like, one of the things, I mean, I've just said I'm not a perfect parent. One of the things I remember her saying is that, as a parent, you only need to get things right about 50% of the time for children to be able to thrive. And you've set your
Yeah,
word, but
yeah,
you don't need to be perfect all of the time. And children have a level of resilience to cope with the fact that you're not going to be perfect most of the time. Maybe our adopted children can be a bit more sensitive to nuances and have a bit more intuition, and that makes it a little bit more complicated. But, that was one of the things. When I got something wrong, I used to think, yeah, she said, this is okay. I've had a good day generally, but I might have lost it. I maybe didn't respond to that in the right way, but actually we'll be okay because there's other stuff that's okay. So that was one thing. I can't specific. There were lots of things. Her children were grown up and older, but as she went through that training, there were lots of things. And one of the exercises we did that really struck me differently in doing that from a personal perspective was, we'd split into a number of groups, and we had to think about what would you have given to what would you have given to your child if this was your child by birth? What would you have given to them even before they were born? And things like you'd want to have a stable relationship, you'd want to have a home that you could raise that child in, you'd want to know that you'd saved enough money, you'd be not drinking alcohol, you'd be, all these things that you would do for that baby even before that baby arrived. And then to think about what many of those children who are coming to us through adoption may have experienced even before they enter the world. And that really hit me, that the amount of disadvantage that child, even before they're born, has experienced at the point they come into the world, there's such a significant amount of impact pre-birth already, and that hit me in a way that I don't think it had done before that. Not properly. I think bearing in mind we're going back probably 16, 17 years, but I think we understand more now, don't we, about pre-birth trauma and the impact of that. But at that time I don't think we did understand it very well. But that little exercise really helped me to sort of think through that actually our little people come into the world in adversity, don't they? And even before then, there will be things that have gone on for them that you wouldn't want necessarily for your child. So, even when you adopt a very young child, there is
yeah,
impact, isn't there?
yeah.
And so that was interesting.
Yeah. it's
I think,
not theory, and it's not generalized. It's not theory anymore. It's
yeah,
specific. And it's your own insights. You're not being you're going somewhere in your experience rather than
yes,
being told something. So
yeah, yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. And I think professionally that, I think I probably have a lot more empathy with other families and children, to be honest, knowing and having experienced what I've been through and what I've experienced um, personally in that on that adoption journey. And I quite often find, when I meet with adopters and they know who I am, they know I'm head of their organisation, that One Adoption South Yorkshire. But the minute you tell them you're an adoptive parent, it's a completely different story. They're your friend at that point, not just,
yeah,
and they think, oh yeah, well, she gets it, then she understands. So I do think professionally, it's really, I didn't do it for that reason at all. I did it because I thought it was something I'd be able to do and wanted to give a child a home. But I think, yeah, I do think it brings a lot professionally. So when I'm looking at service developments, I find it very easy to think about that now from a perspective of a child and a family and how they would feel in that situation, which I think does bring a lot to the professional role. I think on the other side, I think sometimes it can be challenging. You're talking about maybe doing some training, and you've got that double thing going on in your mind. So you're thinking about it from a work perspective, but you're also thinking about it from a personal parenting perspective. But I think we've sort of navigated our way through that over the years,
yeah,
probably.
yeah. So what are your things? You talked about service development. What are the things that are on your radar? I mean, we're doing this 4th of December 25 listeners. So what sort of things are on the radar for 2026?
So we've just employed a 16 plus worker. So thinking about young adopted adults, or young people approaching adulthood and into early adulthood. I think that's been an area that we've perhaps had less focus on, and we know now that we need to be continuing that offer of support. We're looking at building our young person's adoptee voice into our service development through that, looking at having a sort of adopted youth panel that we can run all our service development by, so that we've got adopted people's voices and views in there. We had a training session this week, which was on attachment and trauma through the years. Our psychologist delivered online one evening this week, and we had a young person present there who was able to bring her own personal experiences of that, and it was just invaluable. So not just the theory, but the young person then, she's a young lady in her sort of early 20s now, but had really sort of been able to process a lot of what had gone on for her and bring her perspective to that. And I just think it just brought the theory to life. So I think our direction of travel very much bringing adoptee voices to everything that we do. I'm relatively new in this organisation and been there since June, but this feels like a really important area of development for us, to be honest. So a psychologist just joined our service earlier this year as well, and again already it feels invaluable, not only to offer consultations to families, which she does, but offering support to our staff going out there,
Yeah,
working with families as well. So I think those are two developments that have started this year, but will definitely come into fruition much more next year. We're looking at a conference around neurodiversity in early March, and the impact of that for adoptive families and adopted children. Again, I think that's a huge area of consideration. We know that there's a disproportionate number of children adopted with some aspect of neurodiversity going on for them, in addition to what can also be trauma and other things. So I think that will be a really good event in March as well,
yeah,
when we can sort of, I suppose, expand the knowledge and the skill horizon for professionals, but also building that family experience. So we've got a whole combination of adoptive families coming to that, and professionals under the same
yeah,
roof.
yeah. We, you mentioned the trauma word and professionals. I also think about this in terms of adoptive parents, right? This secondary trauma stuff. So what are you looking at in this area? What are you learning in this area there of secondary trauma?
Around secondary trauma, I suppose obviously we're working with lots of families, with, some of them with kind of, needing advice and support at that lower end of the spectrum, and others at the other end of the spectrum where things have been difficult for a period of time potentially, and they're really struggling. And I think secondary trauma for them does become really important. So we sort of run courses around child to parent violence and things like that for some of our young people. Those anxieties around that attachment lead to all kinds of difficult behaviours, and there is an element of secondary trauma without question around that. Yeah, I think secondary trauma is a big thing, isn't it? It's yeah, involves lots of different people in lots of different
Yeah,
ways, doesn't it? It's difficult to know how to sort of talk about it in this context, but I think just being aware and alert to the fact that that does happen, and that sometimes the adults around the child need support with that as well as child and young person
yeah,
is actually really important.
yeah.
Yeah.
The game changer for me on this secondary trauma thing was hearing Bessel van der Kolk, who,
Okay.
like him talking about his secondary trauma and the fact that you said it's about being aware of it. Well, Bessel van der Kolk, he wasn't aware of his, right? So it's something that there's that fantastic quote by Jung, isn't it, about until we make the subconscious conscious, it will rule our life and we will call it fate. And, I think that Bessel van Gogh with 40, 50 years experience, however long he's been working in the trauma field, and yet he was oblivious to his own secondary trauma until he did some, um, uh, I think, like it was some kind of drug assisted therapy, right? And that made it became evident to
Mm.
him. He hadn't seen it. He hadn't seen it before. So we can say being aware of it, and I guess it's
Mm.
as you said, it's being aware of it. But no, but really being aware of it. That if it is a thing that has just been becomes so part of our normal that
Mm.
we can't see it.
Mm.
Yeah,
No, I think that's right, and I think, even as professionals as well,
yeah,
you've worked in
definitely.
a job
Yeah,
like I've worked in for 35 years, as I have, there is an accumulation of other people's trauma, for want of a better phrase,
yeah,
and tragedy and awfulness, that accumulates. And I think it's right that as professionals we have time to stop and reflect on the times, and maybe it sometimes comes because I don't know, maybe suddenly, other life events and that collide, and
yeah,
suddenly you don't feel okay, or so it can
yeah,
manifest itself in your health, can't it, or
yeah,
your mental health, or in the way that you respond to things, and you think, well, what's going on
yeah,
here?
yeah,
So I think, creating opportunities for people to have space. We've had a really difficult situation at work last week. um, it was yeah, I
yeah.
can't go into too much
No,
detail,
of
but it
course
was a
not.
really
No, it's
difficult. It was a really
confidential.
difficult experience last week, for some of our staff, working with a family, and it was important that as an organisation we recognised that and said, look, this is going to be a really difficult time for you. Help it supporting this family, and creating some opportunity to come together as a people that had sort of been part of that family's life, to be able to talk about that and think about that together, supporting them to do what they need to do next, and just, at one point I just said, just go home, it's fine, this afternoon you just need to go home and do what you need to do, or go and grab a cup of tea with somebody else that's been here.
Yeah,
I suppose that, it's just allowing people to think about that within the moment, isn't it, and acknowledge it, and support them
yeah.
to move on with that. But yeah.
So, other than secondary trauma and issues like this, and we talked about the life collisions. Uh, what else, what do you see getting in the way of us thriving?
Um, yeah, so I think we've touched on some of it as well, haven't we? That sort of not allowing our adopted children, young people, to feel what they need to feel, trying to sort of push those, even behaviours. What are those behaviours about? I spent a lot of time stood at the school gates thinking, is this kind of normal childhood behaviour? Is this something else for my child?
Yeah.
And quite a lot of the time it was, oh yeah, this is just normal. That's great. That's you deal with it, don't you? And other times you would think, maybe there's a bit more to this, and just giving that a little bit of thought, really. So I suppose, yeah, it is. It is, I suppose, as people around that adopted person thinking behind what's going on. So it's not just surface. It's not just, oh well, this is what 3-year-olds do or 5-year-olds do or whatever. That's about saying, is there something else going on here for my child? I suppose bearing in mind that sort of early childhood memories will pop up from time to time and we won't quite understand them. There was an incident for me with my son when he was quite little around a sausage roll from Greggs, and you just think it's a sausage roll from Greggs. But actually there was something around that sausage roll that was about, for him, when we unpicked it a little bit with him and had a little bit of chat with him, was about him and his brothers, who were all under the age of 4, you know, wandering off to a shop to get themselves some lunch, in probably what was quite an unsafe environment where perhaps there wasn't very much food. And this sausage roll had triggered all kinds of emotions. So I suppose it's about allowing our children to be able to express those, isn't it? Helping them to feel safe enough. And that is about validating feelings. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to think about these people. It's okay to miss them, isn't it? So yeah. I've forgotten the question now.
No, no. I guess I'm talking about the obstacles
The obstacles, yeah,
to
yeah. So
thriving.
when we don't do that, that would be an obstacle, wouldn't it? We're not
Yeah,
allowing our children and our adopted young people to feel those things. Um, yeah, I suppose. Yeah, just that sort of, what they may want to do or progress may not be necessarily what we want to do, but that needs to be okay, doesn't it?
yeah,
I think sometimes adoptive parents, because they may have some of them in any event, you've spent long periods of time wanting a child, not been able to do that, and then this little adopted person arrives, and it's, I think they've had a long period of time to dream up what ideal family life looks like, and actually it doesn't necessarily, and so it doesn't necessarily fit the mold. But I think there's something about being realistic at the point that young person comes to you, and I don't mean, by realistic, I don't mean that we don't have high expectations, but that we understand where that child has come from, and actually that no parenting is perfect, is it? What the image of parenting that many adoptive may have who've not had children, the nice pushing the pram around the park on a sunny afternoon, how nice is that? Well, actually babies cry, and it's tough,
yeah,
isn't it? A lot of the time parenting is hard work and it's difficult, whoever you're parenting, quite actually.
yeah,
So I think a healthy dose of realism really helps, and allowing children to be who they need to be, and that could, that's going to be lots of different things, isn't it?
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
I think all those things conversely can get in the way, can't they? If we don't allow our
yeah,
child to do. If I'd made my son do the jigsaw my way instead of his way, he doesn't get the opportunity to develop his skills, does he? And think through, actually, what's the best way of doing this, and is this the best way of doing that, and and all those sorts of things. Yeah, I think there's lots of ways that we can get in the way as parents, can't we? Yeah.
yeah. Just I want to take you back a fair bit to you were talking about therapy, with a professional hat on. You were talking about therapeutic interventions, and I'm wondering what you're learning around, what have you learned around that area in terms of, and what are you learning in that area in terms of what is effective. And the background to this thought, to that question, really is my own work doing somatic experiencing. And because person after person that's been on the podcast has said, look, talk therapy doesn't work for pre-verbal trauma. You know, if you don't have words for it, if you don't have a
Mm,
picture of it,
mm,
if you don't have memories of
yeah.
because it's pre-verbal, then you can't talk it out. You need to go. You need to
Mm,
go to a different
mm,
modality. I think is the jargon
mm,
word in terms of a type of therapeutic intervention.
mm,
I'm wondering what you're learning around that area in terms of effectiveness of different sorts of intervention, perhaps at different ages, and for people
mm,
for adopted people with different backgrounds.
mm, mm. Okay, so okay, big question.
Yes, a
Just
big
picking up,
question.
just picking up, just something that you said there. Just thinking about my experience with my son. Obviously, at 4, he's had lots of pre experiences prior to coming to me. But as he's got older, we've been able to sort of look at him and sometimes reflect on that. And I've been able to do that for him and said, this might be about, so,
Yeah,
this, we know this happened when you were very little. And, that might have meant that, maybe in this area you've not developed quite as in the way that other children will have done. So that might affect the way that you are dealing with this situation now. And we've been able to do that. And I think that's I wouldn't call that therapy,
no, no,
but I think it is helping. I know and children don't find that easy to do until they get much older, of course, and that's a process throughout life, isn't it? But I suppose giving him the skills to be able to think for himself, why have I responded to this situation in this way? I wonder if that is about something else, or am I just cross today?
yeah,
I've got out of
yeah,
bed
yeah.
wrong side. So
Like self coaching kind of stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we all do a
Support
bit of that, I
jargon.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all do a bit of that, don't we?
Reflection.
Yeah,
Reflection.
reflection. Yeah, and teaching them to reflect and be able to do that. And I think he's quite good at that now, actually. So
Yeah.
sometimes he'll now say to me, "Mum, do you think this might this happened and this is how I felt and this is what I did? Do you think that's?" So I think creating that relationship whereby you can talk to your young person about things like that is really important. It's not therapy, but
No, no.
it's a skill, isn't it, to be able to have. So and that isn't because he's got tangible memory, but we've got quite some good life story materials which have really helped, I think. So we've been able to go back and say, well, we know this happened because here it is, it's recorded here. So that's at a kind of low level, and I do think that can be supportive if adopters can do that. And in terms of therapeutic intervention, obviously with the introduction of the Adoption Special Guardianship Support Fund came a whole sort of raft of therapeutic options for children and families. So we do lots of assessments, and we have considerable numbers of our families now that do access therapeutic support, and lots of different types of therapeutic support, actually. So in terms of what works, I think that's a big question, and I think it depends so much on individual family circumstances and children's circumstances. Probably the things we commission most of are the DDP, informed therapies. We commission quite a lot of art type therapies, so just giving children space to express themselves, play therapies. We do quite a lot of therapeutic parenting for the adopters. So therapeutic parenting courses, which
Yeah.
are helping parents to sort of see what's going on underneath the surface of their child or young person's behaviour. We run therapeutic parenting courses for very little children, called Little Buddies, which is aimed at sort of very young children early on in their adoptive with their adoptive families, so that we can start that process really young. So I think what works best. I think there's lots of different options out there, and it's very much about assessment and thinking about
Yeah.
families' needs and where children have come from and what the presenting issues are. Will determine what happens next, really, and
Yeah.
what type of therapeutic intervention is appropriate.
Yeah. And presumably then when you've got more knowledge of a
Mm,
particular
mm,
family's challenges,
yeah,
then you can signpost them different thing and different ways.
yeah,
But obviously not all our listeners are in South Yorkshire. So, perhaps the role of the agency can be important here in terms of giving you some guidance on the right approach given the circumstances and the age of
Yeah.
your child. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so we're about to bring our psychologists into some of that process as well, so that we've got some psychological oversight of that. So I mean, a lot of our staff are very skilled, to be fair, in determining what's needed. But sometimes our families come with lots of different needs and lots of different complexities, and so she can have some oversight of those situations to make sure that we're putting the right thing in for that family. And of course, sometimes we get it wrong, and it isn't the right thing, and we have to think again then, and think, well, actually, maybe that wasn't the right thing.
Yeah.
Let's think again, or maybe that family's not ready for that intervention just now. So let's take a step back and see what else we can do.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. So I think we're coming up on time here,
Yeah.
Karen. Is there anything that you'd like to share that I've not asked you about that you think it's important for perhaps adopted parents in particular that are listening that I've not
Um,
mentioned?
and I think one of the things we all often wish that families came and asked for support sooner. Um, don't leave it till you've got a crisis, I would say. We've got all sorts of sort of low level interventions, or sometimes just talking stuff through. A consultation with somebody can be really, really super helpful and put you back on track. Or put you in give you a bit of advice. So I think for adoptive parents, I would say don't wait until you're at absolute crisis point. Just come and talk to us.
Yeah.
We're not wanting to blame. It's not about blame. We expect adoptive families to need support from time to time with all kinds of different things, and that's why we've got a service. So
Yeah.
we want you to. We want people to come, and that would be the same for all
Yeah.
organisations. Come and
Yeah.
talk to us early.
Well,
We have lots of kind of social kind of stuff goes on, and
yeah.
somebody can get free tickets for all sorts of things around South Yorkshire. But just coming to an event, meeting with we often have a worker there, just saying, oh, I've just got a bit of a problem with this. What do you think? Getting that help really early on, I think, can be
Yeah.
really, really beneficial, and it can be really maybe even prevent a situation escalating
That's
to a
right. Yeah.
crisis. So I think that would be my advice to adopters. Obviously, young people, adopted people are absolutely what we're about. We support the adults
Yeah.
because our main concern is about those children and young people and making
Yeah.
things right for them. I think across the country there's a lot of work going on to make sure that we include adopted people's voices and adopted young people's voices more in
Yeah.
the services that we deliver. So I think that's a
Yeah.
really important step forward as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So thank you very much, Karen, and
So
thank you, listeners. We'll speak to you again very soon. Take care. Bye bye.